Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another Alkebulan Awakening Series in conjunction with Kumbukeni. My name, as always, is Oladele Dosumu. I'm the co-founder of Emerging Alkebulan. And what we do on this platform is to decolonize our minds and reawaken our consciousness. We need to wake up. Unduku.
Habari gani, karibuni, asanteni kwa kuwa nasi. The name is Nduko, born and raised in Kenya, but recognizing that the Wana Ubuntu Africans are a global community and embracing that beyond the borders that the white people put for us. We were never invited for that party, so we are not acknowledging anything that they agreed with each other. It means nothing to us, null and void. So looking forward to the conversation today. Asanteni.
Okay, our special guest today is Omoyele Sowore. He's a political activist, social activist, a politician, and a journalist. Omoyele, can you please introduce yourself to our global audience, please?
Well, you've introduced me. My name is Omoyele Sowore. I'm from Nigeria. Published of Sahara Reporters. I've been pro-democracy campaigner and presidential candidate in Nigeria two last elections. And of course, I've just been roaming the world, hoping to find a better world wherever I will find it.
Thank you, my brother. Okay, the topic today is why is African politics so corrupt? That's one question that as a Nigerian, as a diasporan, we know there's so many reasons why it is corrupt and it's implicitly built into the system. But my brother, you've been a social activist, a political activist for years. Obviously, I followed you and I followed you for years. And basically, one of the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing is because you inspired me to actually do something. Because you basically did. Because me and my wife, we've been following you for years, and we just love how radical and how uncompromising you are, and we just love the spirit. So yeah, my brother, let's start with that. I know the question is basically broad, but if you want to break it down a little bit, how did we get here? Corruption in African politics. What's got us to this stage?
What started corruption on the continent of Africa is what brought Africa to be. The African continent now wasn't a continent that was created by Africans, was created for Africans, with artificial borders, with violence, with deceit, subterfuge by the so-called colonial masters who started by helping African leaders in those days, traditional kings, to help defeat their neighbors. That was how they started. That was after slavery. After slavery, they started by helping Africans to defeat themselves. And they didn't have colonies in those times, they had protectorates. So one day they decided that they were tired of having protectorates because at that point, one of the worst mentally challenged kings in Europe, King Leopold, had set up a rubber plantation in Congo that's killed so many people. Stanley, who also had issues, had gone to the Congo. Brazza, who also most of this. One thing is interesting about all the guys that claimed they went and discovered Africa, where people had mental issues. Either they were lost or they were looking for some form of escape from their own personal issues, including the guy who they claim discovered River Niger in Nigeria. That was his second trip. Mungo Park. Mungo Park was also a mentally challenged fellow who went there. Went the first time, couldn't make it. The interesting thing about it was that, and this is part of where the corruption of history comes from, Mungo Park never even made it past the rapids. So how can you discover a place that someone you met there was one who put you in the canoe? As it's same with Stanley. Stanley never discovered anything. The people of the Congo were the ones who took them and showed them all the villages that were along the river. So they were the ones who discovered the Nile, the white, and they were the ones who took all the colonial masters to where they found these things and then renamed and corrupted the continent with it, and then did whatever they did with us. So after the protectorates, they met in 1885 and decided with Leopold, who at that point, whose only job was running after a 13-year-old girl. And he went over to Germany and said, look, why are we helping to protect this Africa. Just let's partition Africa amongst ourselves. And that was how the partitioning of Africa came. And everybody, I mean, every hamlet in Europe was interested because you can't call them even countries in those days. Italy was a small place. The UK was pretty much about Liverpool and the business of bringing slaves and produce. Germany was run by these crazy people who later led to two wars. So, and they decided to partition Africa amongst themselves. And what is interesting about it is it started from corrupting the culture. They were the ones who introduced violence. They're also the ones who introduced corruption that we're talking about today. So, to the point that, without sounding as cliche, it's the most corrupt places in the world today are not even on the continent of Africa. The most corrupt street in the world is Wall Street in New York. So, but, and this is very important, that Africans don't get it wrong, that their own people too, because you're talking about decolonization. When the colonials left, they left some of the worst characters, mentally deranged thieves to run the continent because they cannot deal with real Africans who had the intellectual capacity to run Africa because they've seen Africa.
Mm.
That if real Africans lead Africa, Africa will beat all of them silly in a matter of, just like they're doing today in New York at the marathon. All the female leaders are Africans, all the male guys who blasted through the finish line are Africans. So how can you imagine that people who can run for 42 kilometers nonstop will be beaten by white people who are, some of them are just now just reaching the 15 mile of a 26-mile race in New York. I'm talking about physical energy now. And
Yeah.
so all this is important contextually to understand
Mm.
how we got here. It has to do with how they sustain the leadership that get Africa to where, especially after that whole struggle for independence. And if you look at Africa, as I've always said, Africa was not even named after Africans; they're named after Rhodes. Rhodesia was a guy who was stealing gold. uh, Nigeria used to be slave coast with Togo and Benin because they were running around doing slave business. Ghana, so Gold Coast, there was Upper Volta named after a place they found a river they were using for business. And Sierra Leone was where they found, it was Sarah. So, and Cameroon was named after where they found the most amount of shrimps. So these guys just partitioned Africa based on what they could get. So they were the ones who brought greed uh, to Africa. They brought avarice to Africa. They brought violence to go with it, and deception, which they call religion, was how they rounded it all up, and then started writing the story of the defeated people of Africa in what we now call and they study as history. So there is nobody who will not win a Nobel Prize if the entire continent is forced to read their books. You know, you call literature,
Yeah.
and Africans themselves can't even read their own languages, and we're still all over the place, including Twitter, trying to smack ourselves for not being able to write correct English
Mm.
or speak Queen English, and the Queen doesn't even know how to pronounce the Yoruba name. So I'm just putting all this together so that we can understand how the corruption started. Because corruption is not just financial corruption, there's cultural corruption, there's religious corruption, there's corruption of spirituality, and then you have geographical corruption, historical corruption. All of this corruption are the reason why we are where we are today, including even the economic policies that were introduced to Africa that popularized Africa. They were all corrupt.
Yeah.
All of the loans that they're setting up, those loans don't exist in reality. You just package something and say, hey, you take these loans. In most cases, the loans don't even leave the bank accounts of the World Bank and IMF and their consultants. And then Africa will have to pay for things that they never tasted. And you imagine, for instance, the idea of cocoa, and somebody's growing cocoa in Ghana, and a place that is frozen that cannot even grow cocoa farms.
Mm.
Pumps, the place where you have to buy the most expensive chocolates. If that is not corruption, I don't know what is corruption. So it's a very oppressive kind of corruption. But we must also bring it back home, and I've mentioned it before. There
Yeah.
is no way you're going to allow, those idiots that were imposed on the continent to also walk away, because they love it when you exculpate them. Oh, you are not corrupt. It's a white man that is corrupt.
Mm.
Yes, those who are complicit in the direct stealing of our resources, who take the money meant for education, infrastructure, high-speed rails, and healthcare away and keep them in banks that they don't even know the passwords when they die, or their families don't ever know about, are also very complicit, and they cannot be allowed to get away when we are defining corruption. So that is how I want people to look at it, because yes, I don't want us to become people who have made a career of blaming white people.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, white people have enough of blame. Everybody know who they are. We know how they operate.
Mm.
But how can you not know how to surpass the way they operate for over 60 years? You understand? Kids that were born, our own kids that are born like 10, 15 years ago know how to bypass their parents. How come Africans don't know how to bypass the white man, when even some of the white man tools and research, I mean, inventions,
Mm.
quote and unquote, are there for us to use in getting past them? I mean, you have countries like Portugal coming back to borrow money from Namibia. That means there's something going wrong on their side, there's something going right on our side, even though they were responsible for the wars, strife, and crisis that had made sure that Africa doesn't go past where it is today. Even the map of Africa, I studied geography. It's unbelievable. Each time I'm flying and that rolling ball comes and Africa looks like, you know, a piece of stone and in the world. When in fact, Africa can still fit China, fit Northern America and even South America. But when you are doing the map of Africa, it looks like, the it looks like just little thing that stands on top of a barrel of a gun. So I flew from France to Mauritius, and we haven't even reached South Africa yet for 12 hours. And it doesn't look that big on the map.
Mm.
You're gonna fly from Nigeria to Kenya, it's gonna take you some 4, 6 hours. It doesn't look that big. But if you look at the map of the US, where from the east coast to the south, I mean to the west coast, it's just about 4 hours maximum. It looks like the biggest place in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so that is part of what needs to be corrected. But we cannot have that conversation without talking about our own share of the blame of
Yeah.
where we are. And it's not only about these idiots that are being imposed on Africa to run Africa, but the rest of all us Africans who continue to accept this kind of useless leaders that were imposed upon us or continuously be imposed upon us from time to time, and we keep debating whether Africa is rising, or all those cliches that they hand over to us every year. And then the best representative of Africa are not even Africans, the one who define what's the next logo Africa will look like, we use for their next international conference on hunger and starvation. We are not the one who are supposed to be subject of hunger and starvation when we have the largest lakes, streams in the world. We have the most amount of resources you can imagine. We could have the best species of animals and fishes, and untouched. And our biodiversity is unbelievable. And on top of that, some of the best weather you can find anywhere in the world. So what is wrong with us is why we cannot focus on our traducers alone. We must also have a very fundamental conversation about what are we doing wrong and how are we going to stop it.
Thank you, bro.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. We need to unpack that.
what is wrong with us? I'll hang it there. What is wrong with us? And I like that you, as we talk about, yes, we know what the root of the problem is, but that root would not be able to grow any plant if it didn't have the right conditions, and
Yes.
therefore the idiots that you just mentioned. But you say, how can Africans, because this is something you said, and I want to get my question from it, how can Africans not figure out how to bypass the colonialists when African children learn at a very young age how to bypass their parents? And Oladele and I were speaking before you came on, and I was sharing with him because Kenyans have been very active on Twitter in spaces, organizing, because we have to get Ruto out. There's no ifs or buts about it. There's no following the constitution. There's no voting. Nothing. No, that's nonsense. And so, um, my as we were in one of the rooms, we had a couple of brothers who came in, and no matter how much we explained to them the situation and how we can't follow the legal system, and every time we explained, they said, yes, oh, I understand, yes, I understand. And then they came back and still said, the constitution is functioning, let's follow the constitution. And therefore, my brother and I, Oladele, concluded that these people just don't want to get rid of the comforts that they have. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Because yes, go on. So talk about that, because in Kenya it is very obvious it's not functioning. There are people being abducted daily. There are people being killed by the president. The president himself a couple of days ago said that he got the new vice president so that he can be someone who goes and cuts heads when he of his enemies, and comes back to ask later why he needed to cut them after he's brought the head. So please speak on that.
Well, I happen to be one of the persons who don't follow the argument that the constitution should stand in the way of liberty and freedom, because the constitutions are supposed to be made for you. You're not supposed to be made for this constitution.
Mm.
And it was the reason why I spent 5 years between 2019 and 2024 in Nigeria. I was held up there because I did organize a Revolution Now movement. And my position in doing this is that Africans, if we succeed in Nigeria, would be able to take a cue from us and understand that there needs to be a complete overhaul. And I'm glad that when Kenyans went and revolt, they have not reached a revolution yet, but still revolt. They adopted some of those, battle cries: "Revolution now or never," and "Days of Rage." Those were things we started in 2019 and in Nigeria, But this is Kenya we are talking about in 2024. If Kenya could have driven a white man away through the Mau Mau rebellion, how come in 2024 you don't have Kenyans who are thinking over and above? There was constitution also during the era of colonialism in Kenya. In fact, Kenya had some of the so-called best colonialists. They claimed those people that were sent there knew what they were doing. Some of the best educated. Nigeria wasn't that lucky. The guy that was actually brought to Nigeria, Lord Lugard, had failed in Buganda, close to Kenya. So they shipped him over because, and when he was going over to Nigeria, he took his girlfriend, Flora, who eventually named Nigeria, because he saw the River Niger and says Niger area, because they couldn't continue to refer to Nigeria as slave coast. So that was the kind of character sent to Nigeria. But going back to Kenya, look at that very organized, very solid revolutionary movement in Kenya that drove spectacularly the British out of Kenya. Today, the British have now recovered from what the soccer push they got in Kenya. So is it a shame, crying shame that in 2024, a lot of Kenyans are still arguing on the side of a constitution that does not guarantee their rights and their dignity as human beings and their progress as a community uh, who really should be doing way better than they're doing. I've been to Kenya before, and I've also followed Kenyans a lot on social media. They're very good social media giants, such that even what we have to admit that what happened in August in Kenya was what propelled Nigerians, us here, to revolt in August. So But social media is not enough to fight these people. You can't fight, a politically unjust, a culturally corrupt, an economically backward set of people with social reactions alone. You can't fight them with emojis and likes. You have to go beyond that, and that's where putting boots on the ground in a sustainable manner is what you guys need to think about. It's what we need to do in Nigeria. It's what Ghanaians needs to do. It's what everywhere in Africa where there's oppression, they need the same thing. So, and we should not deceive ourselves, because the people who are managing Africa the way it is, who don't want Africa to make progress, will keep telling you, oh, you don't have to move too fast, and these are some of the foundations and think tanks who are no longer doing one thing. Before it used to be that think tanks just come to Africa and focus on African leaders, but the think tanks have now also diverted into social engineering through what we call the non-governmental
Yeah,
organizations, which are
yeah,
largely non-governmental individuals and NGIs, as we call them. Who move from one conference to the other, but on the continent or nationally, to discuss basically nothing. And I say this because I know it very well. I've attended so many of the
yep,
conferences. But what brought me to Kenya was a conference. And you find young Africans just hollering away. And the moment they leave that conference, that's the end. They move to another conference. If one is so, this is part of the problem. So there's a whole lot of deeper introspection that needs to be done. There's fundamental engineering that needs to be done. There's ideological tinkering that is just beyond mountain Pan Africanism, because the Pan Africanism of 1980 that brought that kept people like Mugabe in power, and the crazy man in Uganda can no longer give you liberty. They are better Pan Africanists than those of you who are using it as alias names. They actually practice what it what they thought or believed was Africanism, and then they figure out why they were doing that. Africans are not serious. You can just keep giving them piecemeal, nuggets about Pan Africanism, why you do the worst possible things to them. So this is very important for us. And when I went to Ghana about 3 weeks ago, I went back to see Kwame Nkrumah's burial ground and the whole, information about what they tried to do. And you would understand why the colonialists hated them,
mm,
because the highway that Nkrumah made is still there in Accra, and the ones made after him are still they haven't set up, practically haven't set up a company or a factory since he left. All these big grammarians that you have in power in Ghana now. But look at what they were trying to do. He was way ahead of his time to understand that the way to go was to integrate Africa. The highway they designed from Dakar to South Africa 41 years ago is still at the formative stages. But the white man knew that that was the way to bring about economic development. And they, after the end of the Second World War, started building bridges, tunnels to connect the entire African European nations together while they were decimating African unity. So you have to understand they are clairvoyant enough to understand that if Africans are united, there's nobody that they can't defeat people who are mentally and physically strong. But the moment you defeat their physical environment, you
mm,
ruin their mental capacity to keep growing, and innovating and inventing. Africans would have been probably, I mean, you cannot tell me that people who built the pyramids in Egypt, years that you and I cannot even decide when it happened, would not have invented aeroplanes that are faster than the ones we have now. Reason being that I went to Egypt in 2004, and it showed me a place that was painted with paint made by those Egyptian blacks. And when they said they went to Germany to make a similar plane, and paint some 40 years later, painted over it, the paint from Germany is become obsolete, and the one that they made 3,000 years before is still shining. So you're telling me that if those people were not decimated or destroyed, that they wouldn't have conquered the world by now? They knew it. The people who invented mathematics couldn't have been backward by now. The evidence is still there, historical evidence, so of how they were able to preserve bodies, dead bodies that are still alive today. You can't even preserve anybody past 50 years now with all the science and technology that we have. And look at those pillars in Egypt. If you've never been to Egypt, go find out who carried them, because there were no cranes.
Mm.
Yes. And some of the pillars, even today's cranes cannot move them. I saw this in Cairo. I saw it in in different parts of Egypt, and you understand why not only was Africa colonized, was targeted.
Yeah, my brother, having the kind of ingenuity that you just described, we have everything we need to make
Mm.
Africa work.
Yeah.
We have everything we need. But why are we so complicit and corrupt that we don't see beyond what we're going to eat today?
Mm.
Because you've been fighting this battle for a long time, and our
So, so,
problem is, yeah, go on.
so let me explain to you how Africans became that.
Mm.
First is like, the moment you take away from people their ability to produce and progress, you turn them into guinea pigs for psychological experiments. And one of the worst things you can do to anybody in the world is to take their ability away to feed themselves. And that was the first thing they did to Africans, is to take the strongest Africans from the continent and take them elsewhere to go and make food and clothing for other people. That was slavery. So slavery did not target people who have physical disabilities. It did not even target people of certain heights. I guess that's why you still find some of the tallest people in the world, black people, playing basketball, because slavery specifically, genetically targeted Africans to take away from Africa the strongest of his people and the most brilliant. That was what slavery did. And that robbed Africa of the capacity to develop its ability to feed itself. And it's until when you have food and you can tell me this. It is until when you eat that you can think properly.
Mm.
So if somebody wants to destroy you now, they'll just make sure you don't have access to food. You will not be looking like this in 30 days, my brother, if you can't eat or feed more than once or twice, or even feed at all, because the nutrients from your brain will be the first to be consumed. And yes, because everything we are eating, everything, and you must look at this scientific, everything we do on a daily basis in feeding ourselves is to provide nutrients
Mm.
to feed our ability to think.
To
Its
think, yeah.
brain is the biggest receptor or receiver of nutrients. When you are breathing in the oxygen, everything is to make sure that the brain is functioning very well. So when you take that nutrients that makes your brain function, then you've destroyed everything. And that's what they did to Africans. And the moment Africans became hungry people, then the daily struggle then became what Bob Marley used to call rat race. Even when you win, you remain a rat.
Okay, Nduka, you want to ask a question before I ask the next one?
Oh, yes, I do.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the Kenya Land and Freedom Army, the KLFA, otherwise known as Mau Mau. And you mentioned how they were able to defeat the British, because if not for that pressure, the British would not have felt threatened enough to say, okay, we need to step away. And one of the things the Mau Mau did, the KLFA did, was they made it a nightmare for the white man to exist in Kenya. If you read the stories, they gave them sleepless nights, they gave them nightmares constantly. And there's only one way to do that, and it's not the constitution, it's not begging, it's not sitting and negotiating. So I get a lot of people who tell me, you cannot talk like this. Watch yourself. You cannot talk like this.
So
But
let me tell you, and this is important.
thank you.
It's also part of the psychological engineering we're talking about. People who are your comrades in arms or should be your comrades telling you how to talk or how to conduct yourself. You've already defeated yourself if you accept that. I'm an example of that. I get tons of advice from people, especially those who are supposedly well educated, the diasporans. No, you're not supposed to talk about this. Don't say you want to overthrow the government. No, don't use certain words. Before you know it, you are the one that is already self immolating. You are burning yourself down. You are burning your passion down. You are burning your capacity, and by extension, you start sounding like the same people
Mm.
that you want to take down. So you're talking about making life uncomfortable for oppressors. How can they be uncomfortable when you don't speak out of passion and anger? If you are not angry, then why do you want change? If you don't want to change the old order, why did you get all these kids on the street in Kenya and Nigeria, and only for them to go back to the same elections that have already been predetermined, or economic systems driven by guys who just finished from college in the US, who work at the IMF, the group I call the International Monetary Fraud and World Bank. These are the people controlling your economic life. Some of them don't even know the map of Kenya. They don't know where, some of them don't know where Kenya is located, and the ones that know it understand why they are on the continent of Africa. They know how to manipulate you, and even Americans who invented democracy, they are no longer believing in democracy.
They have never practiced it.
They,
Never.
It's a
well, yeah,
fallacy.
that's a conversation for another discussion, But look at what even they themselves, and they're not speaking nice anymore. Even the richest guy in the U.S., Elon Musk, is a bigger troll than any Kenyan troll or the president. He will say the most egregious racist things. So why can't you passionately speak about things that affect your existence, and then self-censoring yourself? When I went to Nigeria, Oladele would tell you in 2019 to talk about revolution, everybody I knew wanted to, before the government came after me, it was people supposedly on our side that wanted to strangle me first.
Yep.
Why on earth did you use the word revolution? Do you know the meaning of revolution? When I was arrested and the day of revolution now was supposed to happen, 5 million Nigerians went to Google to search the meaning of revolution. It was a taboo. And when I was in detention, everybody's like, only if you can just, come out, and the government sent a delegation to me. We're going to forgive you and let you go if you do just two things: apologize to the president and renounce the word revolution now, because we don't want to hear that. And I was the happiest person, because any moment you're speaking a language that your oppressor cannot feel comfortable about, you have started the process of victory against oppression. That's what happened against the colonialists. The moment people started using the word independence, we don't want colonial rule anymore. It got them upset. When they left Guinea, the French, those ones are a different world of they had a
God,
19-year-old
it's the
idiot
worst.
ruling Guinea. The guy was so upset with the word independence that when they were going, cash registers, he went and pulled it. They put telephone thing and put it down. Like, you guys are not going to survive after we leave.
And cement in their piping.
Yes, they put cement in the water pipes.
Yep.
So are you expecting those kind of people to respect you if you are speaking the language that they have designed and sanitized for you? What do you think social media is doing? That's exactly what I wanted to say about social. What do you think? What do you think Facebook is doing? Facebook has become the new colonialists, censoring what you can say and what you cannot say, putting you in Facebook jail. The same way your government will put you in jail is what Facebook will say. If you say something they don't like, even if it's something that is reasonable and liberating. So the same thing, Twitter can take you out of existence If you keep saying what they don't want you to say. So that's why I also was saying the over reliance on social media is itself a weakness, even though it's important because communication and engagement is important for those of us who are looking for liberation. But one thing the Africans must decide is that we must get back to Ghana again. All Africans. I'm not saying Ghana as in physical Ghana. It could be a virtual Ghana where all the African people who want a new Africa, new liberation, please don't use the word African rising around me. I hate it when people, but it was designed by all these World Bank guys, to bring comedians to be running arguments that are supposed to be run by intellectuals. This is not a Bono idea. Don't bring Africa right. Let's go back to our Ghana again, discuss and be very clear about how we're fighting our oppressors. And it has to be Malcolm X way. That is necessary.
I agree.
Bro, my question now is saying what you're saying. We know that to fight this battle, we can never use the oppressor's ways at all. And I see my people, like you've said, I see my people, they continue to use, mostly, you said it earlier, the most educated people are the most compromised people.
Yeah, because education itself is not education. You see, a lot of us we have mistaken literacy, Western literacy, being proficient in speaking English and reading physics, chemistry books written by white people as education. That's not education. That's literacy in European ways. Education is far deeper than that. So when you say educated people, you have to also qualify it. If you have traveled on the journey of second slavery, which I'm also part of, and you are part of diaspora and all that, you cannot claim that because you have a master's degree at Harvard, you're educated. Because there's a lot of illiterates at Harvard. I attended Columbia University. I've had cause to say to them one day in a conference that I addressed that I think this is where the rich people came and dumped their most foolish kids.
I agree, 100%.
And because you can't imagine what they say and do. These are kids that were supporting George Bush when he was invading Iraq and Afghanistan. And today we're right, they're wrong. Because, only a few of us could say in those days that this is wrong. Because America was making the world look like, oh my God, they just attacked us. But the world forgot that in 1970 or 71, same day, September 11, America went to attack Chile with a military ruler, Pinochet. The man killed more people, dropping them from helicopters that died at the World Trade Center.
And Panama, remember what they did to Panama?
Everywhere. So these are things that we must understand that, and until this new set of Africans who are not too much into comedy, because I can't get over the comedians who want to turn intellectuals on the continent of Africa. There's no serious country or continent of people that sends comedians to go, and comedians are supposed to be jokers in a palace. So that's why they call them palace jokers. And I'm not saying that there are no comedians who are sound, but I'm just saying that there's too much comedy around even serious issues. And that's why we have music now that has melody but no message. But you can still sit down and listen to Zimbabwe from Bob Marley, and all his and be inspired. And then you can't remember the song that was sung 5 years ago by the best musician in Nigeria, even though they have more popularity. I'm just saying this so that we remind ourselves of the volume of work that needs to be done to get out of this, because it has piled up for too long. It has piled up for too long. And to remind people, our people outside, that look, if by next week Donald Trump is elected in the US. I don't care which of them is elected.
Yeah,
Don't get
no,
me
no
wrong,
one.
please. But I know that there are going to be smoldering blacks in Europe, burning blacks inside of their houses if the right wing resurge through that act.
Mm,
I'm not saying that the people who endorse the killing of Palestinians are different. So there is no political party here in the US that is fundamentally different, but at least some might pretend than others. But there are some that are clearly would not just the act of the election itself will inspire a new set of act of madness. The type that led us to have King Leopold, and what he did uh, right there in the Congo. So we are going to have our own ground zero.
mm,
That's the problem, and we must start having that conversation now. So that's why I'm calling on Africans. Please, this conversation needs to start now,
yeah.
because most of us might need to be heading back home, whether we
Oh
like
yeah.
it. Yeah.
I'm doing the
And
same, bro,
even,
just like you, man.
even without if Donald Trump, anyways, you know, a lot of Africans are tired of being visitors in other people's countries. A lot of Africans are tired of that. I speak to a lot of people.
Mm,
All the Africans that were happy to come here 20 years ago have all healed, they've all hit the glass ceiling. I don't call it a ceiling because the ceiling looks nice. If you say it's glass, this one is concrete ceiling. And everybody's tired. They've seen America and America has seen them. America has now put them back out of business. So a lot of people are dying to get back home. Even the new immigrants who have just come to Canada from Nigeria, every one of them, what I hear from them is not sounding good. But we have a continent that can accommodate all of us,
yes.
and also accommodate people who should also be strangers on our land, or who should be there addressed as so,
Yeah.
who are called expats now.
My brother, let me ask you this one. Saying what you're saying, and we know that these Caucasians means no well for Africans. They've never done. Their intentions have never been right. Why are we still accommodating them in Africa? That's the
Part of
question.
it is they did something unbelievable. Well, it's believable. That's what anybody who wants to conquer people for a long time should do. They conquered our minds.
Mm,
Uh, and this wasn't done by Caucasians alone, it was done by Arabs too.
yeah, yeah,
And they did that through religion.
yeah,
You know, yes, you can complain about the white man in Europe treating you bad, but go and look at what Arabs are doing to blacks too.
yeah. 1,300 years of it.
Yes, same thing. But the most foolish people on the continent will still carry themselves inside plane and go to Israel to go and worship a God that even the Israelis themselves don't believe in.
Mm,
And the rest will carry themselves and go to Saudi Arabia and worship worship there until most of them die,
mm,
in stampedes. Africans, mostly Africans. So because they treat us the same way. The white man treats Africans the same way Arabs treat Africans. So the reason again is the first thing they targeted was our mind after they conquered some of our bodies.
mm,
Because they know that it's difficult to keep strong people down if you are not in control of their minds.
yeah.
And that's why even while Europeans and Americans have abandoned the theology they brought, Africans are waxing stronger and exporting it back to them.
Correct.
So the people who told you that gay is bad have accepted you, the Africans who they told about it. You are killing yourselves over it. The people who said the Catholic Church is bad and as a result left the Catholic Church and created their own, and call themselves Protestants, have also given you another one that says there will be prosperity that produces more poor people than has ever existed anywhere on earth. So that's one of the decolonization Africa must do is decolonizing the mind from religion. And I know this is the most controversial part because they'll be praying for me to die because I said this truth. But
Bro, you know what, Yele, I completely agree with you. Me and my
I am
sister, we talk
not
about this
I'm
all
no
the
longer
time.
afraid of death, you know. If it comes today, I have done way more than I thought I would even be doing. I've I never thought I would live this long. So done my best. But the truth must be told because so that they can liberate a whole generation that is coming. You know, I know that there's a generation that is planning to understand this, you know, because religion as they use it to deceive people is on slaughter slab right now. They're cutting it into pieces through social media, but you can trust them that they will go and reorganize, recalibrate, and reinvent it
Mm.
because it's very important that they keep it going. The moment that aspects of colonization collapses, the freedom you are getting, you get 60% of it. There will be 40% left. So it's called the decolonization of the mind.
Yes,
Exactly.
exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
So the current Kenyan revolution, as we dig deeper, because I honestly think corruption is just a symptom. The bigger problem is imperialism and neocolonialism, but which is the mother of corruption.
That was keep that see when you think about how much Africans steal from themselves, from their budget, is nothing compared to some of these white
Exactly.
boys. Yeah.
Exactly.
So a guy can walk into Nigeria and take a bunch of gold bars and they'll be worth billions. And he'll go and set up a foundation, you know, his family will be the richest. And then you'll be wondering, oh, you know, but the Africans who, these foolish African leaders, they'll lure them to a place to go and open an account. The accountant, the teller, everybody is still a European. They
Mhm.
don't even know how much money is in it. They will tell you they're helping you to invest it. When you die, the money, what all the money that Mobutu Sese Seko stole, where is it today? All
Mm.
the houses they has on the French Riviera, did anybody know their address anymore?
Mm,
Because they weren't selling houses to you; they were selling a mirage. You know, they knew that you don't need more than a room in the house. When they give you a tailor who is sewing you a clothes that you can only wear once and it costs $1 million, and they tell you that you can stop a bullet because they know nobody's gonna shoot you
yeah.
because you have too many bodyguards. so so this just all it's all a lie. It's a facade. It's and you know it is this kind of conversation we're having is the way we can tear apart this facade. And the moment the facade is torn apart, we will start to see the other side of the greatness that we are meant for. Because
Mhm.
but without tearing down these walls, you know, we are not going to get anywhere. We're just going to be in circumlocution, plenty of movement. I mean, plenty of motion, no movement,
Mm.
like a revolving door.
Yeah. The So in my work with my brothers and sisters in Kenya, um, and it's a space where there's a lot of grace giving because a lot of them are Christians, a lot of them don't understand global political dynamics, and you're explaining it to them while also um, making sure you don't get burned by the fire that is them because they're angry, right? And so they say, their main hashtag is Ruto must go.
Hmm.
Uh, And I say to them, if you focus on that, Ruto will go and then another Ruto will be put in
Of
place
course.
because you didn't address the main issue. And then the other thing, too, they get frustrated with is they don't want to talk about how we are going to plan the new Kenya before they remove Ruto. And I say that's a flaw in your planning, and that's a very sure way to be defeated because we can do multiple things. We can remove whatever it is we need to remove, but we must plan how the new Kenya is going to look like. We
Yes.
must plan how the new Nigeria is going to look like. Thomas Sankara was successful because he planned ahead of time what he envisioned of Burkina Faso. Nkrumah was successful because he planned, he had talks with people, brothers and sisters within the United States, the Caribbean, back at home, way before he became president. So please talk about that. Preparing for what we want, the Africa we want, while also fighting the revolution.
Before you go,
Yeah.
I'm gonna just go on to what Nduku is saying. So basically, which way forward for Africa? Because, like you said before, we cannot use the same colonial systems to fix our continent. So where do we go from here? Because this is basically people need to hear.
So I have to warn us about one thing quickly.
Mm,
There is a tendency to be very overbearing on where we go next, to the
mm,
point that it paralyzes us.
mm,
I have found that to be an effective tool in the hands of people who don't want to do anything. They will keep asking you questions that you have answered, but in different ways, so that you look as if you are empty.
mm,
You understand? And there's an African parable that says if two big trees fall on top of each other, cut the first one on top first. So that because if you are cutting the one down, which is where you are going next, the one on top would follow you. So we must be very critical and very analytical in how much we diverge, first and foremost, because it is important that in planning a revolution, you keep it at a critical mass level.
mm,
Because not everybody would plan a revolution, but you need everybody to make it successful. And I will tell you something that will disappoint you. The moment the revolution is done, the masses are back to where they used to be. They go back to sleep. And they don't want to be burdened with you asking them to help you plan the next. You have asked them to do it, they've done it to you. That's why if a revolution is over, the revolutionaries themselves need to be careful, otherwise they'll be consumed one after the other by the revolution they plan. Reason being that whenever there's a revolution, the day after, people expect to be driving Rolls Royces, even though they were in matatus before you brought your revolution to them. And when you say to them, "Oh, next time," they said that's what the last people told us too. So, and they will start killing. And don't forget that some of the people who would have been affected by the revolution will still be around. They will still be they will be around to also prove you wrong.
mm,
So it requires a lot of resilience. It requires a lot of understanding. We must have separate teams that are doing separate things. And this is very important. You cannot be the one doing the propaganda and doing the planning at the same time, and you can't also reveal all your plans at the same time, because your enemies are not weak.
mm.
If you take over, you mentioned something, my sister, just now. If you take out Ruto tomorrow, there's going to be a Ruto 2.0, Ruto 2.40 that will make Ruto look like a nice guy. That's what we're having in Nigeria now.
Yeah, that's what I
The
was gonna say.
worst guys in Nigeria are always better than the new guys, because they're like an abacus. They've set them there, A, B, C, D. So one goes around, they push another one to you. But one thing you must do, first and foremost, that's why I said the old order must be defeated first, is to destroy that pipeline that produce foolish morons in your country. You can't leave that pipeline open and say you want to go and plan. They also know how to plan. They are not sleeping. They are not. Ruto doesn't sleep. You can see from the amount of bags under his eyes. You know that this motherfucker don't sleep. He's an evil doer. They plan all the time. They got to be planning and planning and planning because they want to stay ahead of you, and they have the resources to plan against you. Even the social media companies you are seeing, they have governance groups that
Yeah,
visit these dictators and
yeah,
have strategy sessions with them. You
yeah,
have never heard about them before, but I can tell you they're based in London. Facebook has a governance group that's interacting with all the terrible dictators on the continent of Africa. They have to be in their good books because they need to keep making money off of you guys who log on every day. 40 million people log on Facebook from Nigeria every year. They prefer you or die than the government in whom who are they in cahoot with to lose power, because they know if the people who are their friends lose power, you're also going to control their behaviors, and they don't want that. They want to keep making money. That's why I was saying to you, social media organizations are becoming the new colonial masters on the continent of Africa. They are colonizing your mind. They're using, and they have a political agenda. They have a foreign policy agenda. Facebook's foreign policy agenda is stronger than that of the US in terms of protecting the state of Israel. You can't mention Palestine on Facebook, you'll be banned immediately. It's like the algorithms are ruthless. So you can still protest in the US against Israel and go home, but you can't post against Israel and be able to log in back to Facebook almost certainly. So they have a foreign, but they are becoming virtual countries, virtual, you know, imperialist uh, concerns. So we must understand all of this, but also I don't want us to lose sight of this. Um, is that don't let people also push you in the direction of their own agenda, which is that you must disclose to us what happens next.
Mm,
Whether you fight a revolution or not in Kenya, something is happening next.
mm.
Something is happening next. Yeah. The people who are stealing your money are doing it next. The economic policies are coming next. Yeah, they are coming after your education next. They're coming after your electricity next. They're coming after your water resources
Mm.
next. So there's the thing is to accept is that you must get to a point where you say, look, we are stopping here. We are not going ahead with you in
Yeah.
this direction. And don't fall for the blackmail of, oh, what is next? What is next? Because it's a question you can never answer, even if you have all the prophets from Nigeria on your side.
And it appears, Oladile, if you allow me to ask a follow-up, it appears then I stand guided as you say, and you're right. And which is why I give grace in those moments, because I see that argument that you make. But the question I'm going to ask is, then do we need, because you mentioned the Rolls Royce expecting
Mhm.
Africans when once we get revolution. I believe, I'm not going to ask you as a question so that you, because I actually do believe. Enough with asking questions when we already have answers in our heads. So I believe that we need to be clear about what the revolution is for.
Yes.
We're going against capitalism.
Yes.
So no Rolls Royces will be given afterwards.
Because,
We're
and so don't tell any lies to anybody. Yeah,
exactly.
in the course of the revolution, you and I know that we
Mhm.
can drive African Rolls Royces. If Africa wasn't treated like this, Africans will have the highest number of Rolls Royces.
But
But we don't need Rolls
thank
Royces.
you.
Understand? We need our humanity back.
Thank you.
We need our communities back. We need our climate
Thank you.
back, restored. I grew up in a village. Every year by this time, do you know how we used to feel that we have a lake beside that? They would lock the lake. It's not, they don't put a padlock. They just decide that look, nobody goes to fish in this lake
Mhm.
until December 24th. And a bunch of people around who are, who are watching over everybody in the community. And when I look back, I said, look at this very powerful environmental method of preserving the ecosystem.
Fish.
And when it is 24th of December, when we all rush back to the lake will have unbelievable amount of fishes that we've never had before. They have grown big, they've come out of hiding. We take whichever one we take, no greed, but there is something left that keeps us going because it's a complete environment. You know, when our environment was to go down, they started using dynamite to fish in the same lake. All the species are gone. Why? Greed. But it wasn't a white man that taught my great grandparents to log the lake. They didn't even go to school. It's not the white man that creates what the Yorubas call Igbo Irumole. Igbo Irumole is not as if Yorubas have some forests that we was the way they were preserving.
The basin, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
the ecological system around them because they knew that they were interdependent. It wasn't the white man. It was the white man that came and started cutting the trees down, selling it to Europe, and turning it into IKEA for
Mm.
furniture that you don't need. You understand? And you're buying every time you're back to buy furniture and you don't need it because
Okay.
you just need a stool and a chair and you're fine. But why is it? that the consumerism that is created in Europe keeps you buying furniture you don't need because they need you to buy rubbish that you don't need. That's where Rolls Royce came from.
Mm-hmm.
Rolls Royce is not even something that anybody can maintain. It can't even, whatever you hear about Rolls Royce, it can't do the job of a donkey. Because this time you drive it for a number of months, go back for maintenance, and sometimes you have to fly it back to the manufacturer to maintain it. So most
Oh,
of these
brother.
Africans that are driving Rolls Royces cannot use it for Motatu. It doesn't have the capacity to do it. It's not a great engine. Even the Rolls Royce that they use in flying aircraft, they are very difficult to maintain. They'll tell you, those of them in the air industry will tell you that they're very, very expensive to maintain. Why do you think, what's that one that there's a car that was made in the UK, the popular one, Jaguar? Do you, do
Hey.
you, you know how they describe it? Say, if you want to buy two, put one with the mechanic. This is high maintenance. You have to keep maintaining it. So I'm just responding to that so that you understand we don't need Rolls Royce on the continent of
Yes.
Africa.
Yes.
Yes.
All the people that are driving Rolls Royce, why are they all running today in New York? They're not running because they want to win the prize, they want to live long. Yes.
Mm.
Because the physical exercise we do on the continent of Africa in farming and all that prolongs our life.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So the Igbo people, the white people here, want to, because they know that this is the only place they have.
Mm.
That's why they are running. Every one of them runs every day. Exercise, they're on the bike. If you are in my neighborhood on weekends, you can't find a space. Everybody's biking. They're not biking to go and become Armstrong. They want to live long.
Yeah.
They understand. But Africans understood this long time ago. That's why my grandmother died at the age of 107.
Mm.
We used to live longer than these people, and we're fisher people.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing sedentary work. So how come the life that they said was bad for us, they have embraced now?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they used to ask you, Africans are always running about. What do they want to run with animals? But
Including taking a bath daily, but
yes,
I digress.
so we got to a point where we abandoned what used to make our life better.
Mm.
We used to protect and preserve our environment,
Mm.
and we embraced everything that was wrong elsewhere, and we
Bro,
abandoned everything that was right on our side.
yeah.
Hey.
Bro, let me ask you, man. We got a next generation of youth, and Africa has the most viable youth population in the world. I could see the work you're doing, trying to inspire, but how do we get to these youth to get them on the right trajectory? While because there's a basically, I don't know, the former head of state said it, that there's something's about to explode if we don't do nothing with these
Mm.
youth, because they are there and they are frustrated. How do we inspire? What do we do? How do we get them to where they need to be? Because we have the most they basically, if the youth get together, what I'm trying to say here is, if they get together, we can actually kick out all these old cargoes.
Yeah.
So how can we get them together to actually use their numbers to
Um,
get them to the right place where they need to be? Because the future is theirs.
the simple explanation is to get to get the candies out of their hands. And when I make candies, you know what candies are.
Mhm.
But that's not candies as in those. There's
You mean sweets, which we call
yeah,
sweets?
the
Yeah.
younger generation is too distracted. Like
Mm. Oh,
they
you
like
mean this?
yeah. So with social media and all that, this is the kind of distraction that will make you just blow through your youth age, and when you find out you're on the other side of it, you're already 40, and all you have ever done in your life is Facebooking, TikTok,
Hey.
and Twitter. You know, and the people who designed the distractions knew what they were doing.
Mm.
The people who designed 1,000 channels on cable, when they know you cannot watch more than 10 in your lifetime, know what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so it's to create a consumerist culture, a consumer culture in which you get completely carried away. So the new generation, as vibrant uh, uh, as they are, must learn to become viable. You use the word viable. No, they're not viable yet. They are vibrant. There's no question. They're catching up with the world as it's evolving. But viability is a different situation from being vibrant. So viability is when they become productive, when they can take charge of their lives and decide for themselves what they need to make themselves the greatest in the world. Because all the Europeans you're seeing today, what they did even during colonial era, they did in their 20s.
Mm.
I think King Leopold was 33 or so.
They were all young.
Young people, but they
Mm-hmm.
had the idea that they want to conquer the world.
Mm-hmm.
You might fault it now, but they went all out for it. The ones that had money, were sending people to go and they used to buy information from Stanley, uh, who this place was named after, Congo, the main Congo and Brazza. They'll go for months, and then when they come back, they say, "Okay, come and explain to us what you found, where you got there." And then they started figuring out how to transport themselves there, how to bring the goods and services from that part of the world. So the young generation must also understand that in conquering the world, they must become very ambitious in such a way the ambition will lead to viability. Are you getting my point? So that,
Yes.
but this is not going to happen by moving from one candy to the other. Uh, they must produce,
Mm-hmm.
and production doesn't mean that they work in factories alone. They must produce ideas, and they must stay with it, and they must think outside of the box, which is what a lot of them are struggling with. There's something that they have been able to conquer a little bit. I think the younger generation, they are not that religious.
Hey.
Yeah, interestingly, I don't know how they figured it out, but I think social media might have contributed to that.
Mm-hmm.
I
But
think they saw their parents and they could see that there's really
yeah,
nothing wrong
so they
with their
saw what
parents.
happened to
Yeah.
their parents who are knocking their heads against the coffee table, every day, and nothing happened. And then say, maybe this really doesn't work. And they are also very smart enough to understand, because research is available.
And critical thinking
Yeah,
is
the
being
more
pushed
critical
now.
thinking, and they operate from the place of doubt and then move
Mm-hmm.
towards faith. Our parents operate from the place of faith, and then they start moving towards doubt before they die. Most of them never get to doubt what they believed in. And
Yeah.
what is keeping a lot of our generation in religion is because they are too ashamed to admit that what they have always believed all these years is
Exactly.
false. They just can't come out and say, "Look, my goodness."
Mm-hmm.
Except those ones who traveled abroad and found out that they don't have to pray on transformers to get electricity. So, yes. So, but even those ones still create their own religious groups abroad because the people who sent them need to export.
Oh.
This export business. But I don't want this conversation to be completely religious.
But there's no way to talk about
There's
corruption
no way
without
to talk about
including,
exactly, but there's no way.
because Ruto is in the church every Sunday.
It's like,
And
oh yeah, all those guys. Some of them are multi-religious.
yes.
In Nigeria, there are 11,000, public officials from president to councillor. You can rarely find any one of them that is not religious. They must almost profess a religion for them to be acceptable, accepted. But
And
if
the
you're
church
looking
is
for the most
also
ungodly people on earth, go to Nigeria.
and the church also is their place to wash their dirty money. So the
Yeah,
church is
yeah.
part of the corruption.
The church helps launder money a lot. Yeah, of
Yes.
course. So anytime you see all of these contraptions, they have also an economic and financial purpose to it.
Exactly.
So not gods, because I don't know about Kenya, but Nigerians have figured out how to create their own god.
We had ours
They're in
and
charge of God, and they've completely paralyzed God.
I see what you mean.
Yeah, it's their God doesn't get upset anymore. It doesn't kill bad people.
Ah, yeah.
It's the most tolerant God. I was like, where is the God that used to use thunder and
The
you
God
know?
of the Old Testament, that's
So
because they
yes,
believed in Jesus.
so they've created Nigeria finally found a solution to God.
I'm glad you mentioned that, by the way, as we talk about the fraud of actually the existence of churches and all that. I was saying the other day, but I want to ask my question after. But as you say that, sometimes it's good to I always say knowledge is useless if you take it with you 6 feet under. So every time an idea comes and I have a chance to share it, I will share it so that you all who remain when I go 6 feet under can continue the work.
Yes.
And so I was sitting there the day because we who are starting to see clearer and taking away the white man's lenses and returning back to our way of seeing, as every time we sit, when you have a quiet moment, you're reflecting on yourself, on what you've been lied to for so long. And I sat and asked myself, this God must not be smart at all, because how are you having an Old Testament and then washing it away and saying there's a New Testament? Aren't you the same God? Like, what is new about, like, you see what I'm saying? It doesn't make sense.
No, none of it makes sense.
Yeah. So, like I said, you know what it is. And we all know what it is. The whatever is standing between us and real God, progress. Because for me, progress, great life is what is God.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes. What is standing between us is the inability of those who miss their way. We just come out and accept and apologize. And look, so far we have misled the world. The Catholics had a great time sleeping with all that, they're apologizing, but they're not only apologizing, they're being made to pay for it. So Catholic churches are closing down, they are being turned to clubs, nightclubs, because of the old ways of their priests.
The pedophilia.
Pedophilia. But you see, what you must understand about the religious leaders in Africa is that they want to live their fantasies. And it's the easiest and cheapest way to do it.
Yeah.
And get away with it.
Actually, most lucrative. Forget even about
You
cheap.
don't want
Most
to pay
lucrative.
taxes, you want to become a priest. You want to have access to some of the most unlikely people. You want to have the most money. The religious leaders in Nigeria, they have jets. They don't pay parking fees.
Yeah, there's a recent
But
recent
they
one
can't
with
do that in
Benedict.
Europe. In Europe, where they brought religion from, they can't enter Europe. They pay £5,000 in the UK per night to park their jets. But guess what? Most of them have even been banned from entering the UK because of fraud.
Which is interesting because the UK is the one causing the listen.
Well, the thing is that
The cycle.
they also don't want them. They don't want the population that they bring in. So, a lot of churches also engage in immigration fraud. So-called, I don't what they call immigration fraud is bringing people. They started the immigration fraud,
Exactly.
yeah, by coming to Africa on all kinds of rafts, and eventually under all kinds of circumstances. But they don't want the population to come, too many of them. The more the churches come, the more they bring in their own people. And they're concerned about it. That's why you see that it has nothing to do with the fraud itself. Yeah. So they I'm sure they're happy to watch people drinking Kool-Aid on Sundays.
Oladile, if you allow me
Yeah.
to ask now my question. And
Ask your
this
question and then I'll go after.
Yes, please. So this term I came across recently, but I knew I could see what was happening. The term is green imperialism. And I could see that they were asking Africa to grow trees. I could see that they're pushing Africans to grow trees. And the idea of carbon credits, right?
Carbon emission, carbon footprint.
And therefore they can continue to do the earth destruction that they're doing within their locations, and then they're sending it to Africa for us to repair. And by the way, for an African nation to join in selling or producing carbon credits for Western nations and nations in the Middle East, they have to pay. And they are paid for those credits. It was between $5 and less than $10. And then when the Europeans get them, when they're there, they sell them for like $27, $30 a piece. And so I see a lot of Kenyans, and I'm sure in Nigeria it's happening and elsewhere on our motherland, growing trees and not realizing what is going on, right? We have a lot of conservative land that is being put aside for the white men. Now they're taking over the Congo forest, and they're saying the people who lived there for so many years, understanding how to live with the forest and keep it going, cannot walk in the forest anymore because the white man wants to care for it. So talk about this green imperialism so that our people at home can awaken and fight green imperialism.
If you look at it,
Hmm.
in every decade, they brought something new, appealing, and they're always brought by blackmail. And there was a time it was to say that women on the continent don't have enough power. They drove everybody to Beijing, and still in Nigeria they are still legislating over 35% power sharing with women, and the population of women in Nigeria is almost 50-50, if not higher. Does it make mathematical sense that 50% of the population cannot become president except you go to Beijing? When they were done with that, they came with population control. Like, oh, you have to have only 2 kids. Nobody knew that there was a company in Alabama that was producing condoms that was making billions every year. So that Africans will not have the population that can overwhelm the world. Because now, with China and India, we have discovered that population is actually a resource.
Of course.
Yes, not a cost. But they've seen this ahead. So now they are coming to Africa where tree grows without any effort to ask you to be growing trees. And each time they come with this propaganda, they have a specific tree they want you to grow. You understand? I give an example. The World Bank in 1989, when I arrived at university, was asking that there are too many universities in Nigeria. They don't want you to fund education, let people pay to go to school. And in 2022, no, 20, when was COVID?
2019.
2020,
By
2021.
2022, Americans, Canadians, and Europeans are paying the kids that you said should not be sent to school to come and take care of your children because your nurses are overstretched, your doctors can't cope with COVID.
Mm.
So, robbing the same African of the few doctors that are left. So, suddenly, our undereducated, underfed, and underprepared doctors are the best for you because you have need for manpower. But you found those doctors to be unnecessary to be trained in the 80s through structural adjustment programs.
Yeah, yeah.
That was why the number of universities in Nigeria did not grow until recently. But when Nigeria was having free education, you could go to Nigeria from anywhere to go and be treated at the University of Ibadan Teaching Hospital. Are you getting me?
Yeah.
But the World Bank came and said, no, dismantle everything. We don't want to see that if you want loans from us. But you look at the loans, are we getting loans? No. What is the proportion of what you take from us and what you give us back as aid and loans? They're not comparable. What you take from Congo alone every year is more than what you give to the entire African continent. What you give to Africa continent as a whole as aid is not up to how many bombs you send to Israel to be blown up every night. You understand? Or how much you spent in Afghanistan pursuing a mirage of terrorists that did not have don't have never entered an aeroplane before. But the people that came from Saudi Arabia that were identified to be involved, they didn't touch them because they're your partners in crime. So, guys, it is very important. Again, this conversation has to be deeper and deeper all the time. We must keep exposing to others amongst ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And don't let us make this messaging to be too cliche or unique to us alone. That, except you dress a certain way. We do that a lot because that was what I meant with African Americans when I got here in 1999. They were supporting Mugabe without even knowing who Mugabe was. As far as they are concerned, as long as he's doing all that, paparazzi he does at the UN every year, reading and insulting the Queen, they're happy with that, he just insulted white people. But this guy was killing his own people in Zimbabwe. I remember in Nigeria 2015, I saw him. He came for Buhari's inauguration, and I went to him and said, "When are you going to have election in your country?" Apparently, that was the last time, he was. You remember this girl who was working with me, Deola, who then we pursued him. and the thing went viral. It was big in Zimbabwe, but because nobody could confront him. But the reason I was happy that we did it, that it was not done by a white journalist. Like, your fellow Africans are asking you critical questions, because it used to be white journalists who knew how to embarrass African leaders, because they are the only ones that the African leaders will ever talk to.
Mm.
Yes, they don't talk to African journalists because they don't respect them, because they own the journalists, they own the knife and the yam, as we say in Nigeria.
Wow. Okay, my brother.
And don't forget, we have a few more minutes to go. Not that I
Okay.
want to cut this off, but because that's what
Yeah.
we prepared for,
Okay, no
in
worries.
terms of how long I'll be here today. And
Yeah,
I'm glad to come
that's
back
fine.
in nearest
We
future.
got 10. We got 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. 7 minutes anyway. Okay, I'm just gonna say, my brother, I'm gonna ask you, what keeps you going? Because you've been through the room. You've been through a lot. What motivates you? What keeps you going? That you don't give up, because you see
That's
what
a
people
good
don't see.
question. It's a
You
good
know, I
question.
used to have it. I used to have difficulty answering the question,
Mm,
and then recently I found an answer.
mm.
That this particular question is meant for motivational speakers.
Mm.
You know, so that I will tell you that, oh my God, I put my feet in front and one balance the back. I really, honestly don't know, uh, because I probably would say that I have a special case. What I mean by special case is that I don't know how anybody could have risen from some of the things that I went through
Mm.
and even stand up again.
Mm.
So it's difficult to, on the balance, put all this on the scale and say, my goodness, I have 190 pounds of courage, and 300 pounds of
My brother, let me
and
help
I
bring it
don't
from
know.
a let me help let
Maybe
me
you
help
can help me.
bring
Yeah,
it right.
yeah,
Let me help bring it from a different perspective. So
yeah.
let me start from the point of view of those who are watching us. Those who are watching us, who we need to be revolutionaries, because we need more warriors, are going to encounter the challenges we have encountered.
That's
And
right.
so, you sharing how you got over them so that you can rise and continue fighting is important, so that they as well, when they get to that point, at least they have something that they can reach out to. So, for example,
Absolutely.
for me, working out, listening to music, walking, laughing with friends. For me, I know a lot of people don't like alcohol, but every now and then having a good glass of margarita will help me. So please, brother, what is it
Um,
for you?
oh man,
And good food, and good
this,
African food.
interestingly, what I would say is that I'm able to rest no matter the situation, and I think that's helped me a lot with recalibrating, because I get into trouble a lot. In this, like, my troubles are well documented.
Mm.
So, but I also do workout. I wasn't able to get. You wouldn't have been able to interview me today if I was able to get into the New York Marathon. I've done one before. I was hoping to do another. I've done about 8 marathons. So I get on the road a lot. Just running. And when I run, I'm able to think, because I feel like we're here connecting with our environment if we do it the right way.
Mm.
And I also, when I go to Nigeria, I go back to the village
Mm.
and I swim in the lake where I was born. And Vladimir must have seen this. People used
I've
to make
seen
fun
that.
of me.
Kiribo, Kiribo.
Yes, I go back to the lake, and the people in my village still offer sacrifices, by the way.
Mm.
And so when I'm swimming in the lake, I still find 7 Up underneath, and we used to drink them. We were the gods who the sacrifices were made for. So we used to drink them when we were like kids. If we find 7 Up and we look around and just open it and drink it and empty it, and the sacrifices have gone. But that's a digression. But I think generally people should try to read. I cannot say that I'm an avid reader, but when I was in detention, one of the things I did was, because the first thing they did was take away my phones. I feel like in the future we need like phone detentions. All
Mm.
these devices, just somebody take them away from you for like a month, and
Yeah.
or you can just go detain yourself where there's no phone and read real books, books written by people who have experiences. books, not necessarily movies. You know, I don't watch movies a lot because I fall asleep after a while. I get bored easily. Um, but I don't know if I eat well. I'm an average African when it comes to food. I eat only because I'm hungry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I
That's the
don't
best way.
socialize with food. You know, if I see food that I like, I will be cycling the food until I finish it. Like, if I buy food from outside and I like it, I'll wake up at night and go and finish the food.
Mm.
So, but I also, you know, uh, I shouldn't say because my wife might hear this. I like to spend time just being lonely sometimes. I like loneliness. I like to be by myself sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
But
It's
she doesn't want to hear that.
But it's not loneliness. It's a moment for you to actually be in community with yourself.
Yes.
Because
So this type of loneliness or being a loner that I am is such that I can be in the middle of 1,000 people and retreat to a private state.
mm,
Yeah.
mm,
mm.
That's
the
that.
other
Yeah.
the other thing for me, and I'm sure it is for you, it's just knowing, because we were not always this way. Very few people are fortunate to have been always revolutionary and seeing the light. A lot of us, myself, I believed the UN was the answer. I even worked in the government and all that,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But once you get clarity, and once you know what you're fighting for,
Yeah.
and once you know what you're not going to compromise on, that also keeps you going.
Absolutely. And that's a great one there. That's why I say you should help me through this. I'm not. Sometimes I fight old ideologies,
Mhm.
and some people don't like it. I just hate being rusty, Like sometimes I question why Karl Marx is still the
Hey,
nada of
hey.
thought, because you didn't grow up in Karl Marx's shoes. You didn't grow up in his circumstances. You didn't even come to your village. So being able
And
to,
he was probably racist, but go on.
I don't think you can sleep in his village even today.
Thank you.
Austria, wherever he was born. But that's beside it. But I constantly also question, and tweak in my head. So what's going on? For instance, I'm my own personal biggest critic.
Mm.
Even when I may not have done it publicly, I challenge myself. I ask myself questions like, "What's this?" And sometimes I just allow myself to be unserious too much, and just it disentangles a lot of things in me. It just let me be. Because I feel like all of us also have a being that is our operating system before we start putting apps on them.
mm.
Mm.
So sometimes I delink myself from all the worldly apps that I've put in my system to function. So I sometimes, as a result, that's why sometimes people find me difficult to relate to it, because I'm not functioning in their space.
No.
I'm not
Mm.
functioning within their expectations.
Mm.
And to say, oh, why do you talk that way? Why do you? But as a being, I've discovered that operating system is number one first
Mhm.
before you impose all kinds of jargons of apps on it. And it's been tested, like you said, and I've found it to be authentic, and that's solid.
Thank you. All right, I'm just going to round up now because of time. Just quick one, final question from me, and we need a question from you. From our last guest, what is a tradition on this podcast where we ask our last guest to leave a question for you, which you need to answer, and then you need to leave a question for them for the next guest. So the question they left for you was, what brings you the greatest pleasure in life? How can you use this to make future generations grateful for what you did for the rest of your life?
What gives me the greatest pleasure is solid pain, solid reasonable pain. Whenever I go through pain that has substance to it, that improves lives of people, puts
Mm.
clarity to my way of thinking, that sometimes even stand in the way of what I thought was um, what I would think is the best thing to happen to the world. I would just be happy that I went through such. Yeah. And I can go from when I was in the university and hoping that I would graduate in 1993, and I had pain of expulsion from school, pain of detention, and that was what brought democracy, supposedly. Because now it's very soon people will be ashamed to say they fight for democracy the way the world is going.
And
But that was what brought an end to military rule in Nigeria, not democracy. Because what we have now is morontocracy. Morons completely hijacked the country. You know, the pain of leaving Nigeria when I didn't want to leave. You know, it's so there's all kinds of pains that I had to go through. Categories of pain. But sometimes I question: should we just come and live in pain in this world? And that's where I find the holy grail of revolution to be the necessary way out of it. Yes. And I would never stop asking for it until we get there. I don't have a question for your next guest.
hold on, before you even think about a question, because we have such intellectual laziness. So I want to break down what you just said for those who are intellectually lazy, because there's a lot of them. The higher percentage of our people is intellectually lazy. This is not being said to insult. It is just a fact, and we must be honest with each other. So is it the pain or the overcoming the pain and finding yourself on the other side, having overcome it, that brings you pleasure? And also, pain is not necessarily pain as we know it.
Yeah.
Pain can be challenge. Pain can be struggle. So
Absolutely.
say a little more.
So in most of the times, this is going to be strange too. That's right. Most of the time I've been through some of it, I never thought I would see the other side of it. So sometimes when I get to the other side of it, I don't even know that I'm on the other side of it because another one has started. So it's just like it's difficult to explain, but in the process of going through all of it, I find some very encouraging satisfaction from it, and it is like there's a Yoruba fruit we eat, and it's bitter, but if you drink water on top of it, it gets sweet.
Is it a baluma?
It's not like baluma. There's the one that it's not like orogo. It's but it looks like orogo, but it has a hard case.
Okay.
So breaking it is hard. Eating it is easy, but the sweetest part of it is when you drink water on top of it, you get it. Yeah. But this is way deeper than that, I have to say. But I'm just using that as what sometimes I feel. Yeah.
It's a great analogy.
Yeah.
Okay.
But hold on, Oladele. I'm gonna push our brother because it's a tradition we have, and it's a good tradition because it's connecting us. Please come up with a question for our next guest. And it's a question to contribute to the movement. So look at it that way.
So how can I have a question for your next guest when I don't know your next guest? That's
because we're spiritual people. So it is based on what your goals
are. What I'm
are.
gonna do is we're gonna talk with Oladele and you possibly now. And when I know who the next guest or the next topic,
yes,
I'll give you a question that I think might be helpful.
All right.
The next question. I don't just want to ruin the experience. I know the experience is for you to say, "What's the question?" and I give a question. I don't want to ruin.
But we are Africans. We are malleable. So.
Oh, by the way, some guy has just revealed the fruit. It's called asala.
Asala?
Okay.
Yes. It has a hard case,
Yeah.
Where you
Asante Ibrahim Shoa.
Yeah, asala is the name of it. Yeah.
Asala.
He's right. Yes.
Okay, bro. Thank you very much for your time.
Hey, Oladele, thank you so much. And Nduku is actually name.
Nduku, you said it right. Thank you.
So hopefully we'll meet in person one day too.
Yes.
I've met you already anyway, but we got a lot of work to do.
We're doing some work in your area, so we will meet in person.
All right.
And hopefully you can join us in that work. Oladele will tell you more about it.
All right. Yeah. Yes. Don't expose too much.
That's why I said what I said.
Nothing.
That's why
we will not find out or tip in.
That's why.
President of Nigeria.
Yeah.
Just T-Pain.
Yes.
That's why we're not saying nothing. We have to move covertly. Yeah.
We are learning
All
and
right.
growing, yes, and adjusting.
Absolutely. But it's
Thank
been
you so much.
an outright pleasure just being on your show today. And I hope we can continue to have the conversation
Absolutely.
in a way that would impact a new generation of revolutionaries. Can't wait for the revolution to happen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Peace, brother.
Thank you, bro.
All right.
Thank you.
Justice.
Thank you.
Obulungi, sir, not justice. Justice is unjust.
Okay. No problem.
Have a nice day. Bless.
Thank you, everybody, for watching. And